we are bringing you some news of New York Governor Cuomo after that Attorney General report released yesterday. The governor going from a pandemic hero to now a sexual predator, specifically in mainstream media. To break down this topic, we have Fox's Howie Kurtz. Howie, thanks for being with us here on Live Now. How you doing?
Good to talk to you. Doing just fine. Busy day.
Yes, definitely a busy day. So let's talk about that transformation. Obviously, Cuomo receiving quite a bit of honors and awards during his time during the pandemic, holding those daily coronavirus briefings. Now he's in the news daily, but for a different reason. Isn't that right?
Yeah, look, the press built him up into a superhero. He won an Emmy for those briefings when the pandemic first started. And a lot of journalists liked his liberal policies in the state of New York. And now he basically has virtually no one defending him. The media have completely and totally turned on him. If someone had initially ignored these sexual harassment allegations, New York Times and Washington Post, to take just two examples, both calling on the governor to resign in the wake of this devastating, detailed and rather chilling report from New York's Attorney General. And then you have the parade of Democrats, starting with President Biden and including Nancy Pelosi, both of New York's Democratic senators, many members of the congressional delegation, the mayor of New York City, all saying it's time for Andrew Cuomo to go. And perhaps even more important are the Democrats who control the state legislature in Albany, some of whom had been allies of the governor, now saying they're going to begin impeachment proceedings if he doesn't voluntarily leave.
So you mentioned something really interesting right there. Some people just straight up ignoring these claims. One of those being his own brother on CNN, one of the most watched shows across the nation. What's your thoughts on that? The just blatant not reporting of one of the top headlines of the day.
Well, Chris Cuomo, primetime anchor at CNN, who obviously is close to his brother and just as obviously loves and will defend his brother, is not allowed to talk about him. But there's a real contrast here. Last year, we were just talking a moment ago about the period when Governor Cuomo was riding high. He was on his brother's CNN show 11 times. They were joking around. Mom made me come on. And it became a kind of a shtick, the Cuomo brothers. But then when there were problems with nursing home deaths being covered up in New York State, and then the initial sexual harassment allegations. Remember, it was just 1 or 2 women. Now it's 11 who the state AG says that were sexually harassed and or groped by the governor. At that point, CNN changed its policy. Oh, no, it was fine for Chris Cuomo to talk to his brother then, but not any longer. So he wasn't allowed to cover it. He has apologized in the past for privately participating in strategy calls with his brother, the governor, and top officials. And the report that came out from the Attorney General also said that he had helped draft, or at least had emailed, a copy of a draft statement that the governor later delivered about a day or so later. In other words, he was working on in his defense. That's a very uncomfortable position for a journalist to be in, even when it is family.
But how does that work moving forward? Because the story's not going away. We're seeing so many people, the majority of the New York State Assembly, saying that they are in favor of impeachment of Cuomo. That's likely going to be a story for a while now.
No question about it. And I think, the governor's under tremendous pressure, especially in the face of possible impeachment. Usually in these things, you have a hard core in your own party who supports you. I haven't seen any Democrat come out. I mean, maybe a few are staying quiet and say, oh, no, well, we don't think this is so bad, and we think Governor Cuomo should remain in office. Remember, he was gearing up to run for a 4th term in Albany next year. So the story's not going to fade. I guess the 9 p.m. Eastern hour on CNN is not going to have anything about this as long as Chris Cuomo is in that chair. And at the same time, it's remarkable to me because Andrew Cuomo has always been known as a tough guy who is a kind of a political brawler who knocks heads together to get things done. If you liked what he did in New York, you said he was effective. But now we're seeing the darker side of that style as detailed in an often chilling fashion in this report, harassing, for example, a state trooper, an executive assistant, retaliating in one case against that woman, and his video defense yesterday, I think, is being widely derided as tone deaf. He's essentially saying this is all politics. He's essentially saying these other women are lying. He did apologize to one of them, Charlotte Bennett, who had told her story on the air to CBS News. So I think he actually made things worse for himself. And at the same time, every fiber of his DNA is going to be not to resign. But in the end, he may be going one way or another.
Yeah, right. For people who didn't see that from Cuomo yesterday, it was basically a slideshow of photos showing him kissing or hugging or touching people of all ages, people of all ethnicities, people in the LGBTQ
Men and women.
community. So yeah, that is definitely making its way around the internet right now. But what is kind of falling behind on these headlines is that nursing home scandal. The DOJ saying that they are dropping that investigation, but we're hearing now from Republicans that they want it to be picked up.
Yeah, well, a lot of people think that what happened with the nursing homes in New York State is actually more important because it's a life and death matter, without in any way denigrating the stories that these brave 11 women came forward to tell. That the nursing home situation didn't get much coverage initially. There was a lot of coverage on Fox News, and then eventually there was coverage elsewhere. For those who aren't familiar, essentially it was a cover-up. You can fault the governor's strategy in allowing patients to remain in nursing homes while COVID-19 was particularly having a terrible impact on the elderly. But then the state, there are documents showing that state officials and people in Governor Cuomo's office held back from the Justice Department, the U.S. Justice Department, the details that about twice as many nursing home residents had died than the state had officially acknowledged. Right. And that story, I think, has hurt him as well politically, but not as much as these sexual harassment allegations.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that investigation. Also interesting to see what happens with the governor, with all these calls coming from even the very top, the president calling on him to resign. But when asked about impeachment, he said, let's take it one step at a time. What are your thoughts on what's going to happen moving forward here? Do you think the governor will resign, or do you think there's just too much pride there?
I've learned as a journalist that making predictions is dangerous because people have something called videotape.
Yeah.
But I do think that the debate is starting to turn from what Andrew Cuomo did with these women. Remember, he asked for this investigation. He said he would abide by the results of the investigation. Now he's saying it's politically biased, even though it was conducted by a Democratic AG. So I think we're going to be looking at the possibility, a strong possibility of impeachment proceedings in Albany. I don't know whether the Democrats have enough votes to actually first impeach him and then convict him in the state Senate. But I do think that the debate has turned to how can he govern effectively when the leaders of his party in Congress, in the White House, in neighboring states, governors have called on him to resign, and in his own state. How can he be an effective governor for the remainder of his term when he is constantly under siege like this? And that's where it stands right now.
Right, especially as the pandemic is picking up even in the state of New York.